that's what I've done for many, many years, and that's all I do. I actually have a small contracting business, and I do stuff here on YouTube, and there's other things that I do as well. And I'm actually going to be adding consulting to the pile here soon, consulting people here on YouTube as a service. Not just for personal relationships, because many of my other videos, if you've been watching this channel, it all covers that, but just talking about everything from starting your own business to trying to find other financial opportunities and solutions for people, because we need this. I knew I needed this when I was actually starting my own business and beginning to even grow my YouTube channel and do other things that I'm doing. We need solutions that are real, not something where somebody is data harvesting your information when you apply for a job, which is just utterly, utterly malicious and just cruel to people that are desperately trying to find work. And what we have to understand too is that when you are doing this, they're basically using a data algorithm that is monitoring everything that you submit to be able to attempt to get that job.
So when you think about it, I had to break it up into two parts. I'll explain more here in a little bit. When you look at it, as he described, everything you do, as we've discovered with Edward Snowden and with the other supporting revelatory information, is everything you do online is monitored. Are you aware, for example, in Oregon, when you do the vote by mail, there is a QR code that essentially logs who you are on your ballot. So even the state of Oregon knows how you voted. Oh, my vote's private. No, it's not. Your vote in the state of Oregon is not private. It has a QR code on the ballot, which they scan, which has all of your information to ensure that fraud isn't being committed. Well, that's a good thing. No, it's not. They did a massive campaign, the motor voter registration, which has been found to have placed a lot of people who are not eligible to vote on the voting rolls. And think about it. Where were you on your 16th birthday? I don't know about you, but I made a wasted trip to the DMV to find out I had to schedule my driver's exam, which I then came back to at the next available appointment. But that was the intention, and I learned a lesson. You pre-plan. But more to the point, so how likely were they also enrolling, registering individuals who are underage on the voter rolls? So do keep all of this stuff in mind, that sorry, I'm distracted by the chickens and their obsessive desire to peck away at their second level tier flooring in the hopes of getting chicken feed.
So as you submit for that job, if you are not using the right keywords and phrases, and you won't know until you haven't used them, or you just keep ending up on the wrong end of the pile, you won't know that you haven't used the right keywords or phrases until your whatever your submission is just keeps getting dropped over and over and over again. No human even actually sees it. That's disturbing. So you are wasting a whole lot of time for doing that in the attempts to get a job. Now, many of these positions actually do not have a job at the other end of it. They are simply doing it because it makes it look like their company is growing. So it gives a false impression to people out there that there's a level of success actually happening in their company that is not actually happening at all. Very disturbing, very disturbing. Which means basically they're manipulating the system, and I would have to say it comes really, really, really close to securities fraud. But also, they're doing it so that it motivates their employees. The employees...
One thing to keep in mind is there's multiple types of books that a company will keep One is the books that they release to investors that show exactly that they're growing. The other one is the set of books which they submit for tax filing that shows that not only are they not growing, they're losing business. Well, how's that fair? I don't have the answers to these questions of what is fair. I only know that these things exist in such a manner. You can look at your property taxes as a similar idea. The tax assessed value is usually less than the appraised value. Occasionally there will be some upside down markets, but generally speaking. And you can make the argument, which you don't have to twist my arm much, if at all, to convince me that property tax is wrong. But that I'm just using as an example as to one set of numbers is used to justify the sales numbers. The other set of numbers are justified to justify the tax bracket numbers. So, and as Mr. James asserts, or not asserts, but queries, is seems awfully close to fraud. This pumping up the numbers, showing false growth to satisfy investors to get them to invest in something that is a hollow shell. So.
I feel like there's a constant threat of having somebody come in from the outside willing to do their job for less than what they are willing to do it for. So it makes them feel like they have to work harder to keep their job. And, I mean, shady, not completely illegal, but definitely kind of shady. I can somewhat even understand that reasoning, but it's just being used to the nth degree these days. And with it being used against everybody that might be submitting that for that position, so if all these people are submitting for these positions that don't exist, and that is being done as a means of manipulating and motivating the employees that currently work there to try and get them to work even harder and accept less pay, then we're all losing all the way around. And as we get beyond that, another way that we've been leveraged out of our future, this is something that I've been following for some period of time. This is even hitting the older generation, people that have retired and are living in, say, manufactured housing, mobile homes, things like that. Private equity, my favorite term, right? Private equity, which used to be not so bad a thing in its inception originally, but has now become something that just literally fleeces anything in any industry that it ever gets involved in anymore. They just
I think it was in the last year, there was a woman who was on the Timcast IRL who was describing private equity, and the level of detail and the simplification of which she provided is, in my opinion, mandatory for all individuals to become familiar. How it operates, why it operates, and so forth. And, essentially it goes into what Mr. James is talking about, being leveraged out of our future. As somebody who has owned property in the past, I can tell you that even that hurdle, when I went into it 25 years ago, was seemingly to be a daunting task. And how it's changed in 25 years is, it's like, even buying raw land, you can't occupy it, depending on your jurisdiction, unless there is a habitable structure. And some of these jurisdictions don't allow a motorhome or a fifth-wheel trailer for you to live in as you're building the home. That's considered camping, but not all of them are the same. So you're limited in that. So not only do you not have, most likely, no power, no water, because it's raw land, it hasn't been developed, you then can't even occupy your own land that is remotely isolated. And then when you decide to build, you have to obtain the permits, which aren't too expensive. There's a few $100s, but the fact that you need a permit to build on your own land is another issue. Uh, and there's a time limit. There has to be it has to be completed with a certain amount of time. And I observed, for example, as I was walking through town last night, they're still remediating a house from 2 years ago. I don't know what happened 2 years ago, but this house has been gutted and slowly restored. That one would think that they would have been done easily a year ago, unless it was so severe, the damage, that it had to be done at that, that so much. I don't know. But anyway, if you're familiar with the timestamp of when this woman or who this woman was, please let others know in the comment section. I don't recall who she is or was, and I haven't the ability to do a surface level online search to find out those details. And if I happen to remember in 2 months, then I'll have more opportunity to pursue something like that, which I think is worthy of pursuit, because the more information we have on what is our adversary, our opposition, knowing is half the battle. As trite as that expression, knowing is half the battle. So if you know what it is that you're up against, then you can better formulate a plan of action.
Basically, fleece it for every bit of resources, sell off whenever they can, front load their debt onto the company, and then declare bankruptcy as they leave with every bit of profit that they can, and they screw everybody else over that they leave behind. Well, private equity, since the housing crash of 2008, has been buying up single-family residences all over the place. I would say it's estimated near the area where I'm at about 30%. 30% of homes are now owned by private equity, which is really, really disturbing, especially in areas where the homes are older. They're not going for like newer, really, well, I don't even want to call it high-end. A lot of the newer homes, they got plenty of problems, trust me, but basically the way that they're constructed and just the amount of quality put into it is just not there anymore. Well, these private equity firms are actually going, generally speaking, for older homes. Ones that are built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, ones that are very, very solidly built that'll be around for much longer than a lot of the newer homes, I think. And
one thing that has not been addressed that well with these older homes, these established homes, more and more people are becoming aware of it. Private equity outfits, they have essentially non-compete agreements where one outfit, notoriously, if I'm not mistaken, BlackRock is one such entity, and then there are other entities, but they have these arrangements. They have territories that they won't buy up properties in another equity, so-called territory. I don't know if there's a written agreement, if it's an informal agreement, but there are people who have made maps that demonstrate that equity firm A dominates Texas, equity firm B dominates the southeast portion of America, and equity firm C dominates the Midwest, and equity firm D dominates the Mid-Atlantic, and so forth. And then they do their hopscotch across the country so that they have these regions set up in such a manner. That's one aspect, though. The other, there are two more criteria that has not been readily addressed. Number one, people mock it, but it's the boomers who, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The mocking, the memes and whatnot that you see or hear in videos or whatever online. I bought 2 houses on one income back in, when that mentality. So there's the concept of boomers having a what's called captured wealth, and that is they have purchased these oversized homes and multiple oversized homes, have kept them rather than bequesting, passing them on to family and or selling them to the next subsequent generations. That's one aspect. So you've got private equity firms buying up, dominating regional territories and not competing with one another, buying up SFRs, single-family residents. You have boomers who have captured wealth, unwilling to sell or bequeath SFRs. And there's a third category that has not been addressed directly. You've seen the headlines, most likely. Women now outnumber men in home ownership. Some variation of that headline. There's nothing wrong with women owning a home, but who does most of, if not all of, the maintenance for a property? Now, granted, when I was married, I remember my ex mowing the lawn, on occasion because of my work schedule. But generally speaking, she took care of inside, the meals, the laundry, the housekeeping, and it was nice to come home to a clean home. In fact, it was such a profound experience compared to what it was growing up that it impacted me of how I conducted post-marriage my own life in terms of no dish even left in the sink, even a spoon. If there's a spoon in there or a fork, I wash it, throw it in the rack, and dry it, let it drip dry. That is the impact that her housekeeping and management had on me. But that's a whole different thing, and it was very positive. But going back to it, generally speaking, men are men are who the responsibility falls to for maintaining a home. Quite often. It doesn't mean that women can't, as I just described, with the lawn mowing, but there's others who are capable of doing their own maintenance. I remember a girlfriend wanting, something like bookcases or something set up, and me bringing my drill over and mounting it, showing her how to locate the stud and how you do that, and the reason that you do it, so that you keep it from being tipped over, because bookcases, if they're not balanced properly, can fall over, right? And it's going to be heavy because bookcases sometimes are tall and, books aren't light. And she commented that, yeah, I was just pretty much wasting my breath because she lacked the forearm strength to do what it was that I was doing. I have other such examples that I could go on, but the point is, those are two anecdotes. I have no doubt you have your own anecdotes, but what the main point is, private equity buying up SFRs, boomers refusing to sell SFRs, and then in divorces, because this is how this happens, women being awarded ownership. I had a cousin who was a crop duster, had his own airplane, bought a home of which he stored his airplane behind the home on the property with a dirt runway that he was, so he stored his airplane in his own hangar, had his own runway. His wife ran a hair salon out of the home. When they divorced, he was left with nothing. He was able to keep his motorcycle because he signed it over to his parents. But that is how she became the homeowner, is by divorce. And that is how a significant, if not majority, of women have become homeowners. Not all. I know a woman that is in her mid-40s, never been married, who owns a home, and it's, through her own actions that she has done that. Uh, I've never seen a home, but I do know for a fact, middle of the night, when the smoke detector goes off, she's calling her mid-60s or older father to come over to deal with it, rather than for her to deal with it. To which the mother said, "Well, do you want to deal with it?" Meaning me, and I would just deal with it myself. I wouldn't call somebody to get out of bed and come across town or further to deal with it. But that's me, and it ties into who does the maintenance. So those are your three aspects. Women who have benefited from divorce by decree getting the SFR, boomers who have captured wealth, and private equity. The women who have the homes that have benefited them from divorce, you're going to start seeing a sharp increase in foreclosures, in my opinion, or dilapidation. Meaning they're going to become condemned or cited for non-maintenance. And we've all heard of these stories. There's even a YouTube channel of a gentleman who goes around mowing lawns and being harassed by law enforcement for mowing lawns in order to make the properties more appealing. Because the government is looking at it and saying, "Oh, look, the grass is now 1/8 of an inch too high. We can now write the ticket." So be aware that when it comes to the maintenance, they're going to put a lien against it if the fines aren't paid. So the problem is, as AI starts pushing women out of the workforce, what are they going to use to make the house payments? Number one. Number two, how are they going to make the tax payments, which is actually first position when it comes to liens? Number three, how are they going to maintain their homes with no skills and no money to pay for maintenance, whether it's yard and landscaping or it's simple repair? Private equity is going to swoop in, and sweep them up.
As they target these homes and they wipe out that market, what they'll do is they'll buy about 10 homes, 20 homes, collectively raise the price, and then rent it for an exorbitant amount, something crazy. And that affects the entire market around it. Now everybody is raising their prices to kind of work with that because they're all thinking, hey, look, they're going to make money off that. And now that they've raised the price, the collective price of rent in the area has now gone up. They pretty much eliminate their competition by doing that because everybody's now raising their prices to join with them in it. Not realizing what they're doing is screwing over the entire market and making everything ultimately worse, because then nobody will be able to afford to live there because people's wages and generally their pay just isn't going up. Even in the contracting world, I can tell you this right now. Generally speaking, except for really large companies, we can only afford to charge people what based upon, to some degree, what people are able to afford. So if you're a contractor who decides he's going to increase his prices in an attempt to make more money to try and weather the economy a little bit better, and everybody else is keeping theirs low to try and not completely fleece over everybody and their clientele, you're going to end up out in the wind. You're going to end up losing your business. So you can't do that if the economy doesn't warrant it. That side note, let's just tuck that away there, but so now essentially what's happening is the private equity has been moving steadily since 2008 as well, from not just buying up these smaller single-family homes, the older homes like that. They've been buying up manufactured housing, mobile homes, and when I say that, I mean like the parks that they are on, they're buying up the land that they rent from to live, and then doubling the rent rate, and absolutely absolutely screwing over those tenants and those people attempting to retire there. And some of these people are people that have lived there for 10, 20, maybe even longer, maybe even 30 years. And some of these places have been there for an extremely long period of time. And many of our senior citizens have kind of retired to something more simple like that, so that their money will last longer, understandably so. It's a very mathematical equation, right? If they are doing this to our retired senior citizens, especially the boomers, and just running them completely into the ground, I mean, we got real problems here. Now, thankfully, there has been some move against it to try and counteract this, providing ways for them to be able to buy that land and have, I believe it's called the right of first refusal, where they're able to buy that land and have something reasonable set up to where they're not going to be stuck paying a high rent to some private equity company that rushed in there and basically screwed everybody over. There are some states that are pushing back against this because it has become an epidemic. They consider, this is really twisted, I've actually seen a meeting that was published online. I was actually able to watch it on YouTube where they were openly just talking about it. They weren't even ashamed about it. It's not like they were being secretive. It was a private equity firm talking about how basically they considered the residents that were in these mobile home parks, because they're so stable, but also because they have limited ability to go anywhere. They'd have to pay 20, 30 grand just to get that mobile home moved out of that park. Jailed tenants is what they called them, because they knew that they were trapped in whatever they were going to do. Like if they came in there and bought up the place and raised the rent to double the rate, most if not all those people would be forced to live off much, much less, have to pay the rent, and they had very little opportunity to actually take that mobile home and move it out of the park. So they knew that they had entrapped these people and were screwing them over, and they knew that these people couldn't afford it, and that was the way they intended to make money. Now, it's not that I'm against business or finding a good deal, but if your deal in business is finding every which way you can do to screw the people over that you are going to be dealing with, it is inevitable you're going to end up in a situation where it's going to come back on you. It is going to come back on you. There is no escape from that. You cannot screw people over, treat them that way, and do that, and have it not come back on you. Anyway, that's pretty much it for my rant today. As always, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about all this, and tell me what you think some of our solutions are. Do you think that the solution of attempting the right of first refusal, where a state can basically slow down a private equity firm from being able to just buy up this land and offer opportunities for the people that live there to just be able to purchase the land at a much more reasonable rate and then set up their own form of a co-op? Is that the beginning of going the right direction? Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm curious about your thoughts. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, shame on you. Jump in there and do that. And I'm going to leave it at that today, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon. Make sure you have a great weekend.
All right, I have things I got to take care of, and I wanted to keep this one a little shorter for you. So between this portion and the first section, whether or not my video editor allows me to combine the two, so I've noticed that this format with this camera and the body camera creates the videos with larger file sizes, and the video editor for some reason does not want to adapt, and I don't have the time to research how to change all of that right now. So maybe even upload it in two portions. But thank you for checking out the chickens. As you can see, they're progressing quite well in their size. One is trying to beak me. I've got my finger in here to reload their feeder and water silo. Yesterday I laid down some plastic to make it easier to spray off where they're at. Otherwise, then you got to clean the deposits off the surface. And I purchased a water aerator, but I need to get a water line, and that is to fill up a tub that will put air into the water, and I'm going to put in some small fish and some river rock for them to hop on and look at. And what the cats do with it is up to the cats, whether they scoop them out and eat them, or whatever. But I'm getting it set up so that these feathered dinosaurs can be outside soon. But thank you for checking them out. Their progress is proceeding quite well. Obviously, they're still too young to do the egg laying, but in the meantime, have a good day.